Well, I'm pleased to be here talking with Coleman Barks, and I'd like to begin our discussion by asking Coleman to talk about what led you to become a poet. Was this something that you began at an early age, or how did you come to be a writer?
Well, when I was about 12 years old, I began keeping a little notebook that had words in it, single words, that I thought were tasty, and that I wanted. I just made a list of them. Azalea was one of them. Jejune. I don't know why a 12-year-old boy would like that word, but it means intellectually empty. And juxtapose odd words that I just kept lists of, and also images, some of which I have since used in poems, or a boy stirring a spider web with a stick, or the little feather tinge of darkness that comes at a certain point during sunset. And one of the first images that I tried to put into a poem was the lightning bugs that children try to save in jars, and then that turn bad once you try to save them. So it's an obvious image for trying to keep something that shouldn't be kept. But that was I was serious about that, and nobody much knew about that little black notebook where I kept the images and the words and the language that I liked. And but then later on, I began writing short stories in high school and got some praise for that, and won some prizes. And then in graduate school, I started writing poems and sending them off. Finally got published by the Red Clay Reader in the first edition that they published. So that was the way that got started. When I started interviewing for jobs, I had published one poem and one short story, and interview people would always ask me, which one are you going to be? A writer, a short story writer. And I said a poet. And so that's part of the story, I guess, of how that developed.
When you started writing short stories in high school, was there a teacher or a friend or a family member sort of encouraged you to continue in this?
Yeah. There was a teacher named Jim Hitt, English teacher. I grew up on the campus of a boys' preparatory school in Chattanooga. Tremendously privileged atmosphere, and I had a lot of encouragement from the teachers there. I had every meal with 400 people, so I knew nothing of the nuclear family. I had all these fathers and all these mothers, and there were literary fathers, and there were Latin fathers, and there were soccer fathers. I had all these teachers who served as fathers for me, and mothers, and so I had a lot of encouragement. And there was an organization there called the Round Table. So there was this organization on the campus there at Baylor in Chattanooga called the Round Table, and it was focused the study of literature, not just American and English, but also we would read novels by Balzac and Stendhal and the Russians. And so I had a wide range of enthusiasms, and that it was very much okay to be a literary kind of person in that school, on that top of that hill. And And then Jim Hitt and James Pennington were the real encouragers in that way.
You went to graduate school at UNC.
Yeah.
Was there a time in your career as a graduate student where you wondered what direction your development was going to go in? Did you ever think about being a scholar as opposed to a poet?
Yeah, I thought about it, but I didn't really do it. You know, I kept writing the poems and not doing studies of Galway Connell and W.S. Merwin, you know, which I thought of doing an article on that, but I didn't do it. And so as I kept publishing poems, I found that was a way to prove my validity as a publisher. And so I kept doing that. And that was back when they were doing the numbers game a lot. And I had a lot of poems, so I would publish like hundreds of them over a couple of years, and just kept on sending them out. And so that was, what was his name? I've forgotten that dean that was so involved with the numbers of things. I can't think of his name.
Probably not. Better say who.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, right. No, he was very reputable at the time. Yeah.
I want to ask you a few questions about your poetry, the kind of poetry you write, but it was interesting to me when you were talking about this notebook you started as a 12-year-old with words that fascinated you, that you write poems about words.
Oh, yeah.
That fascinate you, and phrases, or you
That's right.
stop and talk about.
Yeah. There are things that I wait for in poems when I'm writing them, and that is a phrase that comes that's particularly delicious to me. And the little one in a poem called No Finale, and Julio tried the triple and missed. You know, somehow that has a kind of tasty, it feels good in the mouth. And it's not the reason I write poems, but it's like the sauce. It's not the reasons for poems come from a deeper place, I think, and they have to do with some deep longing that cannot be expressed in words, but that tries to be. I felt that in myself when I first read Thomas Wolfe for some reason, and James A.G., and I felt it in Shakespeare, that some need was trying to get expressed that could not be expressed, but that you felt the vitality of it. And that is what I wait for in poems, wait to feel coming through me. I could tell you when it's different kinds of things. Sometimes it's grief, sometimes it's a manic enjoyment of just being alive, and sometimes it's something else coming through that I don't even know what it is. So if you want to call that mystical, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Well, I actually have a question about mystical poetry or spiritual meditative poetry.
Right.
To me, this is an important element in your work, and from the beginning on up to the present.
I hope so, yeah.
Well, would you talk about that?
Well, I grew up right next to the Tennessee River, looking down at it. And I think I called myself a kind of a river mystic. I was going to church at the time, but really the great sacred times for me were down when I was down close to that river. And watching the river, I had a place that I sat by myself. Nobody else knew about it. And just watched it. And it was important for me to go there. I wanted to say once a day, but I didn't go there that often. So that kind of feeling of something large moving along with me came to be a kind of aesthetic that I like to feel happening. I felt it in Whitman. Toward the end of the Song of Myself, he says, there is that in me. I do not know what it is, but I know it is in me. 3 sentences with just dashes in between. They're almost internally, spoken internally. And they're just the kind of a blurt that I aspire to, that honest, not honest ignorance about something vast that we're part of that cannot be said, but that keeps trying to get said.
Another element of your poetry is humor. To me, you're a very humorous, you can be very humorous poet. I don't know anybody who writes better poems about children than you do.
Well, I just take dictation from them, you know. There is an element in me that that wants to tell a joke, you know, and that also, that's related to this large mystical thing, because to me, laughter is one of the places where we express the inexpressible, and we don't know when we're going to laugh or why we laugh. I once took an American humor course. I don't think they have one of those here, but I took one at North Carolina by a man named Horner, and he was the most humorless person. He had these yellow cards, you know, and he would just read them, and you know, and they'd become yellow with age, and he would just take them out and read from them, and then he was talking about Mark Twain, you know, and these hilarious people, but he wasn't at all even about to laugh, and so it was a great, hilarious course, but you can't. It's hard to talk about humor, as it is hard to talk about the musicality of free verse. You know, it's hard to talk about any of these things, but they all exist, of course, and they're deeply important. But we just don't have many words to talk about them. But there's a poem of my own that I've begun to read that I didn't read for years. It's called Audience, and it's about a joke that my dad tried to play on the Rotary Club. He was asked, he was headmaster of a boys' school, you know, and he was asked to give a talk on education. And he found this talk that didn't mean anything. It just sounded like it meant something. And he gave the talk to Rotary, and he was about halfway through, and he realized that they weren't getting it, that it was a meaningless talk. So they were applauding, you know, and so he realized he had to bluff it on through and go all the way to the end and accept their appreciation for issues deeply thought about. And so he came home. He barely made it out to the parking lot, and he started hooting and howling with laughter, you know, and he's sort of weeping too at the same time for his own life, you know, spent mouthing platitudes, and and we heard him coming in, just laughing. And he got back in his bedroom that night. This is one of the family legends of our group. And nobody could join him in it quite. But he was just laughing, alone, hilariously alone there in his bedroom as the faces of the audience kept swimming back by in the wallpaper, They looked. And so that kind of deep ocean laughter and ocean weeping is just something I aspire to, and that's celebrated in that poem called Audience. But yeah, my Robert Bly used to say I would send him poems for the 60s and the 70s, that magazine. And often they would have something funny at the end of it. And he would send it back. He says, "You don't want to have a joke at the end." He might not be that severe now, but I do like to put funny things in as they occur to me.
Your short stories that you were writing as a teenager, and you apparently wrote early in your career, this compulsion to narrate really helps inform a lot of your poems, which are very narrative in quality. And often the story, for instance, about your father, which you just told, I could easily imagine that as a short story as opposed to a poem. And you've even received an award, I think, for being a narrative poet.
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you see yourself as a storyteller?
I do love stories, and I say it, stories that are funny. But I'm beginning now to write more, to break the narrative line, so that it becomes more disjointed, and I seem to be liking a kind of inchoate beauty, something that moves along spontaneously, leaping from one subject to another. I have a poem that I'll read tomorrow called "Starting Out from Ted Hughes's Letters." And I just begin with a little passage from Ted Hughes and then let that go on to wherever else it occurs to me to let it go on. In other words, I have no guiding principle anymore. I just let anything come in. Bits of personal pain that unexplained, that just get thrown in. Thoreau's campsite on Walden Pond, and ways that young people have told me of ripping off vending machines. These things that it may be troubling. I don't know why but this seems like a kind of a beautiful thing to do, to allow to happen at this point in my life. But it's a lady sent me a letter. She did not sign it. It was from Boise, Idaho. I went out there to give a reading at Boise State, and she waited at the end of the line, and it was a long line. They were signing books, and she gave me her book to sign, and then evidently I didn't. My face looked angry to her, and so she wrote me a letter saying that she was sorry, but she couldn't read the Coleman Barks Rumi books anymore because I had so much anger in me. This is an hour and a half of signing books, and so I wrote a poem about that, about how we don't know what our face is doing sometimes, our affect. We don't know what is going on, especially as you get older. I think your face begins to maybe look sad or angry or something, and so went from there to talking about the Buddhist notion of the original face, of the part that will survive the universe, and what is that, and do I really want to show that, and what would that be, and then moving from there to William Blake's prose. I just put a lot of things just cluster around ideas, or maybe they're disparate. I don't seem to be. I'm including a lot of things that are interesting to me, and that's why they're there, because they're interesting to me. It may be that I am violating all kinds of rules for the artistic wholeness, but I'm doing it consciously anyway. I'm sort of drifting around in this answer, like I do in the poems.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading this poem.
Well, I'm looking forward to writing them too. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to talk about your work with the Persian poet Rumi.
Right.
And the relationship of your Rumi translations to your own poems.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. The standard answer I give to that is that with my own poems, with Rumi, I have to get out of the way somehow, to disappear, to take the personality of Coleman out of the way, and to let this enlightened human being let those words come through as they will in English. And with my poems, I try to get in the way. I put my own excitement, my own shame, my own grief in the poem. But with Rumi, if they're successful, I hope I become transparent and let them work their images in their own way, because they aren't always images that I have experienced, whatever an enlightened being is, he's one of them. And that usually means someone who has dissolved the ego, or dissolved the personal self, and that is not, that's not a process I have completed. I aspire to, but maybe that's what's wrong, is that my aspirations are getting in the way. Anyway,
was it in the early 80s that you started becoming interested in
it was 1976.
Okay.
It's been 33 years I've worked on these poems, taking literal translations, scholarly translations by living and dead Persian scholars, and reworking those into American free verse poems. And that's the only reason that I am in the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. I think is because those poems have sold over 1 million copies, and just the ones that I've worked on. And this is outrageous in the poetry world. For that's in the realm of the romance novel. It's not not something that a poet. Jim Dickey used to sell 15,000 copies, and that was outrageous for the time. But this is over 1 million copies. You know, Jim would kill me. He would certainly attack me.
Rumi, I mean, you say you have to get yourself out of the way to write the Rumi poems. In your own work, do you succeed in getting Rumi out of the way, or is Rumi influencing the kind of poet you are in your own work?
Yeah, I know that's for somebody else to untangle, I guess, but I think this, what I was just talking about, this inchoate mix of elements may be an influence that Rumi has had on me. In the last 12 years of his life, he was always spontaneously dictating his poetry to scribes. And he walked around Konya, Turkey, and dictated as he taught. He wrote something called the Masnavi, which is 6 books of 64,000 lines of poetry, and it's all about self-interruption. He'll start telling a story and then say, that reminds me of another story, and then he'll start on another subject, and then he'll say, remember that first story, that 700 lines so further on, and he'll continue the story of the man who shoots the bow, and so it may be that that I'm trying to follow or to be taught by. I'm sure that I'm in a kind of apprenticeship, and have been for 33 years, but I haven't been exactly conscious of how that's working out. And it's a mystery to me, but that just occurs to me that might be one of the formal ways he has influenced me. He also loves to write little short poems, and I haven't started doing much of that yet, the little quatrains that he writes. But anyway, I haven't yet.
Your collected poems just appeared, published by UGA Press, Winter Sky. And how did it make you feel to have this notion of collected poems under your name coming out? Because you're still, of course, writing. And
Oh, I loved it. My career has been very odd. I sent out a book in 1968 to Harper and Row, and it's the first book I ever sent out, and it's called The Juice, and it got published. It got accepted, and 4 years later, it got published in 1972. And then I kept on sending books out 4 or 5 times a year for 20 years. And to various publishers, I got, very close to being published in various places, and but never got published. My second book, and I had it published, little chapbooks published in very small places like David Bottom's press, the Burnt Hickory Press, and Moreland Hogan's press. He's a friend of mine, and but I went 20 years there without any success at kept getting manuscripts sent back to me. And for some reason or other, I was never discouraged. I don't know what that is. It's some kind of grandiosity in myself that I just totally believe in my own ability to write poems, I've always thought I was right there with Wordsworth and Whitman. I have no doubt about it. That's just it's my stupidity probably. But anyway, I can't be shaken now at 72. So I'm just hopelessly encouraged by everything. And so, yeah, but then to finally get a collection published by an actual press that has a juried, reader, it's a process, and it was very fine. I loved being published by the University of Georgia Press. A great thrill to me, and to see it all there. And they asked me to write a preface, and I started to write this preface, and which is, it turns out to be, not quite the truth. But I don't think, as I got to the end of it, I realized this wasn't what I wanted to say, about that somehow there's a lot that's not being said now about, in that preface, about what are the reasons why I wrote poetry. I just sort of went through, I said, well, write poetry, well, because I had children, because I got divorced, because my parents died, because all these other things, my children went off to college, and those are subjects, but they're just the subjects of things that happened in my life. They're not the real reason why you write poems. And somehow at the end of that preface, I began to say it's something about qualities, qualities like grief and like some like vividness, some quality, something that wants to take form in language, and I can't say it. I shouldn't have probably tried to write a preface to those poems, but I did, and I guess I failed, but that's all right too.
Well, the preface is in the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very fine collection.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoyed reading through it.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you,
interview.
Hugh. Yeah, I appreciate that.